Well, it's 0-0 between India and New Zealand after that heroic draw that New Zealand pulled off in Kanpur. All roads lead to the Wankhede Stadium, of course, and there's going to be Virat Kohli back in the thick of things. And the question for the Indian management, which is tricky to be fair, who do they leave out? We'll discuss this and a lot more with Craig McMillan, of course, who joins us in the evening hours in Christchurch somewhere. Craig, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Avanish. It's been raining here in Christchurch, and I believe it's been raining in Mumbai as well.
Yeah, it's raining in Mumbai, it's raining in Bangalore where we're shooting right now. So it's the monsoon season, all right. There's a lot of things to ask you about and go past, but the first one which comes to mind, who replaces Virat Kohli? I mean, who comes in for him, essentially?
Good question. I think both sides have actually got a couple of selections that they're pondering and have to work out. The Kohli one's a difficult one because you've had a new kid come in, play his first test match, score 150 on debut. You really have to keep him in the side. He was one of the key differences between the two sides in that first test in Kanpur. So then you look at who's been out of form, who hasn't scored many runs in recent times, and it's two experienced players in Pujara and Rahane. Rahane was captain in the first test match, so that would be a big call by the selectors to maybe drop him. And Pujara's been a fantastic player for India for a number of years, but you think it would have to be one of those two players. And if I was going to pick one right at this very moment, I think it would probably be Ajinkya Rahane who slips out. I think he's a terrific player, and I think he perhaps just needs a test or two off just to recharge the batteries, rethink his batting and his game plans, and just have a little bit of pressure taken off him. So maybe it's a straight swap in terms of captaincy and also batting positions with Virat Kohli coming in for Ajinkya Rahane.
Yeah, sorry guys, I meant to ask him, in fact, who will come in out for Kohli. My bad with that little question there. But having said that, there's various subplots in this narrative, which is the rain, like you mentioned, but also personal milestones, which we'll touch upon in a bit. But I want to ask you about New Zealand's changes, because I understand that Virat will come back and maybe there'll be an odd change in the bowling. But from a New Zealand perspective, Wagner, I mean, who else could they really throw into the mix?
Wagner has to come in. That is not negotiable. I guess the question is, who does he come in for? I look at New Zealand. They have to be positive. They have to be aggressive. They've got an opportunity to win a test series in India, which doesn't come around that often. And certainly, perhaps with the way the weather's been the last couple of days heading into this test match, again, that might favour New Zealand. So Wagner comes in. I personally would probably bring him in for Will Somerville, who did a steady job in that first test match. Didn't pick up any wickets. Neil Wagner is a bowler that I'm sure the Indian batsmen don't want to face, don't want to have to go up against Neil Wagner. They've seen plenty of him generally in New Zealand, where he bowls short, he attacks the body, he's difficult, he just keeps coming all day, he bowls big long spells, 10, 12 over spells. So I look at Will Somerville and I look at Neil Wagner, I say, well, the Indian team, who would they prefer or who would they least prefer to face? And certainly that's Neil Wagner. So I would make that swap. Still gives you spin in terms of Ajaz Patel, who I think is New Zealand's number one spinner. Probably was a little bit underdone in terms of the preparation in that first test match. So I expect him to be better in this test match. It's a big test match for him coming back to Mumbai, where he lived until he was 8 years old and left with his parents for New Zealand. So he has a lot of family here in Mumbai who will be coming to watch him play for New Zealand for the first time. So it's going to be a special test match for Ajaz Patel back in Mumbai after a number of years. So I think that's really the only change that New Zealand make. There might be some talk about whether Daryl Mitchell comes into the side because he adds a little bit of seam bowling, but mainly batting. He's already scored a test 100 and he's a very classy test batsman. So there might be some talk about whether he comes into strengthen that New Zealand batting lineup, maybe for Rachin Ravindra, who obviously played very well in his first test. But I think Mitchell has a bit more experience, and I think he certainly would probably get a few more runs out of Daryl Mitchell than what you maybe would do for Rachin Ravindra. So they're the two options for New Zealand. Certainly Wagner comes in, there's no doubt about that.
It makes you think because New Zealand, of course, still have people like Jameson and Southey kind of tearing away. And if Wagner on those up and down surfaces in Mumbai, even though they say that it's a green top, believe it or not, which leads me to my
No,
next question.
I
Is
can't
that
believe
a hope?
India are not preparing a green top for New Zealand. No way in the world. So I'll fall off my chair tomorrow if I turn on the TV and I see
Yeah.
any tinge of green in this Mumbai surface. And we know that the pitches are great in India. They have the ability to do that if they want those conditions. They have the ability to prepare pitches that turn, which generally they do for their home attack. But they also have the ability with the great groundsmen they have around India. And the weather, I guess, heading into winter probably would help and aid perhaps a little bit of greenness in the surface. But I'd be so surprised if with Wagner, Jameson, Southey, who have been, I guess, a bit of a nemesis for India in recent times on green surfaces, why would you give New Zealand that advantage?
Yeah, I mean, history certainly suggests that it's going to be a rank turner. So let's see how that really unfolds in a couple of hours time, because we're shooting this in a Thursday. Right. I just want to ask you about Ravi Ashwin, because look, we spoke about him in great length the last time out while reviewing the first test. Now he has three milestones, Macca, to breach. I'll read them out for you because they're quite head scratching. The first of which, he's one shot of having most wickets at a single venue in tests. Now he has 30 wickets at the Chidambaram and 30 wickets at Mumbai's Wankhede Stadium as well. So let's see how he really fares, because history suggests that he's picked three fifers in a has a 10-wicket haul as well. The second one, which is the most pertinent one, he stands 8 wickets short of joining Anil Kumble in an elusive 300 wickets club, which is basically having 300 home test wickets. The great man Kumble had 350 odd. I mean, talk to me about Ravi Ashwin, because at the end of the day, India's home dominance comes down to him and, of course, Jadeja, but he's been stealing the limelight with those numbers.
Well, those numbers are quite remarkable. And I think perhaps Ravi Ashwin doesn't get enough credit as not only a great spinner, but as an all-rounder, because he has a number of test hundreds as well. Um, and a number of his test hundreds have come, like you think of the one last year against England, at an important time in Chennai when India are under the pump, behind in the game, and Ashwin scores 100 and turns the game, then takes wickets. They obviously talk about the great Indian all-rounders, and Kapil Dev is at the top of the tree. But I certainly think that with the numbers he is now achieving, Ravi Ashwin should be considered one of India's very, very good all-rounders as well. I mean, the numbers, him and Jadeja as a spin attack have picked up 400 test wickets in the last 8 years at home. So their numbers are phenomenal. But the thing that stands out for me with Ashwin is over that period of time, he's had 5 10-fers in test matches at home. And whenever someone or a bowler picks up a 10-fer in a match, generally you win. So that's why he's a key in this Indian bowling lineup. He seems to be ticking off a number of records in recent times. And I have no reason to disbelieve that in the next 3 or 4 years, he will continue to do that because he's fit. He's still relatively young. He's a student of the game. He's one of the most competitive players that I've ever coached or been around. His knowledge on the game of cricket is right up there. So he's a key. Those numbers at Wankhede are great. So New Zealand are going to have to be wary of him because in this test match, he'll have more bounce and a little bit more pace in the surface, and that will make life just a little bit more difficult for the New Zealand batsmen.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just meandering towards a scorecard right now on my computer, because Ashwin also scored 38 and 32, which kind of sets me up for my
Yeah.
next question, which is the importance of low order batting, especially in the subcontinent, especially in India. India, I think, have proved that, not just this series with that first test match at Kanpur, with all of them chipping in. How important is low order batting? Because you touched upon that as well the last time out. We saw it in India's away tour in England, but more specifically at home in these kind of conditions, 30-40 is really valuable, isn't it?
They sure are. And you just mentioned Ravi Ashwin, and that partnership he had with Shreyas Iyer in the second innings was crucial with India 50 for 5. And again, in a bit of a hole, that partnership really got India out of trouble and put New Zealand on the back foot. So It's interesting, lower order batting. It's something that in my time with the New Zealand team as batting coach, I spent a lot of time on that lower order because unfortunately for the lower order, quite often they come in difficult situations where they either have to win the game or save the game. So we gave extra time to that lower order in terms of the amount of batting they did, the likes of Tim Southey, Neil Wagner, even Trent Boult, who's probably the world's best number 11. Anytime they can spend extra time in the nets, just making sure and taking, putting a bit of hard work in, some extra time, facing bowlers, and I guess not giving their wicket away. And they take real pride in their batting as well, the bowlers now. So most sides have a pretty good lower order. And those partnerships that we talked about, partnerships of 30, 40, they frustrate the opposition for a start because the opposition want to knock over the lower order and finish off their bowling. So if those little partnerships can just niggle the opposition and get you another 50, 60 runs towards a good target, then come the end of a game, the end of a test match, that can be the difference between winning and losing. So lower order batting is so crucial, and all the sides I know are putting a lot of time into their bowlers having a decent bat.
Yeah, just as New Zealand, they've shown the world how to go about their business in terms of low order batting, and it continued this series as well for them with Jameson chipping in that first innings of the first test. Right, I have to ask you this because look, Virat Kohli is back, and the captain will, of course, be at the forefront of things like he always does. The looming question here is the fact that it's 56 international innings that he's gone without 100. Can he break that jinx? In fact, he averages 26.8 in tests, which is, of course, since 2020. Only Rahane and Roston Chase face worse, which is quite remarkable if you think about it, with Virat Kohli standards being right up there.
Yeah, it's a very surprising stat. Can he break the jinx? I hope not this series. But of course he can. His class is permanent. We know what a world-class player and how great he's been over a number of years, Virat Kohli. So he worries me. I'm sure he's been doing some work in the nets leading into this test match. He missed the first one. I'm sure he wants to make sure that he puts his stamp on this test match, remembering that I'm sure he's still disappointed about the World Test Championship final in England at Southampton under his captaincy. I'm sure he would have loved to have beaten New Zealand and won a trophy for India. So I'm sure that's still niggling away at him. But like I said, class is permanent. He's a player that New Zealand are going to have to be very specific in their plans for because he'll enjoy the Mumbai surface, a little bit of extra pace and bounce probably, which will suit him down to the ground. So, look out. It's always a concern when a player of that class comes back into the Indian side. So New Zealand are going to have to be wary.
Yep, 235 is what he notched up against England in 2016. And the Wankhede, that was a special day for his particular career and fans, of course. But let's see if he can emulate that, or from a Macca's point of view, certainly not. Right, let's touch upon some of the New Zealand plaguing questions. But before that, just a quick shout out from you on Ishant Sharma perhaps being replaced by Mohammad Siraj. Now, we spoke about the earlier changes, maybe Mayank or whoever departs for Virat. But from the bowling point of view, Ishant or Siraj, who would you be happier to face from a New Zealand perspective?
I think from a New Zealand point of view, they would prefer Ishant Sharma because he looks a little bit down on form, a little bit down on pace as well. Hasn't had the best of things in Test cricket in recent times. Mohammad Siraj has been a good bowler for India. He's always, seems to me to always be a bowler that makes things happen. He's energetic, has plenty of energy, goes about, swings the ball back into the right-hander, makes things happen. So I think that would be a good change for India to make. I think that would certainly put New Zealand on notice. And I think he would just offer a bit more of a challenge to New Zealand's left-handers, the likes of Latham, Nichols, Ravindra if he plays. I think he'll be a good matchup for India against New Zealand's left-handers. So it wouldn't surprise me at all in this must-win test match whether he comes in for Ishant Sharma.
Okay, New Zealand next, because look, Kane Williamson just admired the spirit that they showed out there, especially the last two guys lasting for 52 balls. I just think that would give them more confidence heading into Mumbai, and perhaps steal a rare win on Indian soil. Do you think that could perhaps give them that little edge going into this particular test match?
Well, it's certainly possible. Look, I think if we're brutally honest, you look at the 5 days at Kanpur, and generally India were on top in that test match. New Zealand had one or two small opportunities when that second innings where India were 50 for 5. New Zealand needed to bowl India out for 100 and then chase 150, 160. They couldn't do that because of the Indian lower order and Shreyas Iyer, who was outstanding. So India had their opportunities. They'll be disappointed they didn't win that test match. They perhaps should have declared a little bit earlier and had another 10 to 12 overs at New Zealand, then the result might have been different. But from New Zealand's point of view, they have nothing to lose. They got one test match, 5 days of solid cricket, where if they play well, they have a bit of luck and they win the toss. I can't stress enough, it's so important to win the toss in India. So if New Zealand can do that, then that gives them a good start in this test match. And they have the opportunity to do something special that not many New Zealand teams have ever done. I think there's a little bit of synergy as well, because it was 1988 in Mumbai at Wankhede when New Zealand won their last and they're only their second test match against India in India. So perhaps the stars are aligning for New Zealand in this test match. We'll have to wait and see, but they're certainly going to have to play a little bit better than what they did in the first test match.
Absolutely. 33 years later, hopefully it can be another one that New Zealand will look back in time and be really proud of. Now, there was a couple of firsts, more than a couple of firsts in that first game. Let me just read it out for you because some fascinating stats, of course. The first time in 11 years that New Zealand have managed to save a test in India, which is quite brilliant. The first time in 17 years that India failed to win a test match in Kanpur, which is, of course, showing that how much of a fortress it's been for Team India. And the first time in 4 years that there's been a drawn test in India, which goes to show that it's a rare commodity nowadays, with India just rolling over the opposition. And that leads me to my final question before we get the predictions out. Why should I ask you, is it so difficult to beat India in India, you feel?
Because they're a very good side with world-class players, and in their home conditions, they really don't give the opposition a sniff. So, you have to be right on your game, and you have to hope that India is just a little bit off their game as well. Wankhede, Mumbai is a little interesting venue because New Zealand haven't played Test cricket there for a number of years. The last time New Zealand were in India in 2016, when I was with the side, we didn't play there. So it'll be a little bit new. I know the number of New Zealand players have played T20 and one-day cricket there, and obviously a number of them have played IPL cricket at Wankhede as well. But Test cricket's a little bit different. So it's a new venue for this New Zealand side, so they'll enjoy that. But they have to be at the top of the game. You don't beat India by just being average. You actually have to be at your very best. So New Zealand are going to have to try and make sure that all their players are heading in the right direction. They have a bit of luck. They win the toss, because I think that's crucial. And then they can put some India under some pressure, and you just never know. 33 years is a long time to wait, Avanish, for a test win. But I'm just hoping, and I've got my fingers crossed, that the stars have aligned and New Zealand can create a bit of history.
Okay, let's see how that really peters out in due course of time. Now, on the cricket.com app, of course, we have something called the Critlytics, which is basically the world's best cricket predicting algorithm. And that suggests, and I'm not making this up, Macca, 51% win prediction for India, 26% draw, and 23% New Zealand. Is that a fair reflection, or you're terribly, terribly angry at the robot?
I'll take those odds. I really will. I mean, like I said, we've only won 2 test matches in India in 70 years. So 20% is not bad. I think New Zealand have the ability with that bowling attack with Neil Wagner coming back in. If they get a little bit of green light, perhaps you were mentioning that I'm still struggling to understand why that would be the case. If they get the right conditions, they have a bit of luck, and the bowlers come to the party, then there could be a real upset on the cards. But you have to play well to beat India. We've said that a number of times. And India are under pressure. They're expected to win this series. They missed out in Kanpur. So I'm sure Virat Kohli will have them hungry and desperate to win this test match as well.
Okay, and what does your heart say and what does your head say? Prediction.
My heart says New Zealand, obviously, hopes for New Zealand. My head says that India are going to be very tough to beat. But like I said, cricket's a funny game, and New Zealand, let's be honest, have had a good run against India in recent times, whether it's in New Zealand or in England in the World Test Championship final. New Zealand should be full of confidence in this Test match because they've played well against India. But Virat Kohli comes back, and we know what a gun player he is. And it's not going to be easy, but I think it's going to be another great Test match between these two sides who, for some reason, seem to match up well against one another and produce exciting, entertaining Test matches. And I'm sure that will be the case when the second Test starts tomorrow.
Right, let's see how it really unfolds, and we'll of course have it all for you guys on cricket.com. The stats, the numbers, the stories, which of course unfold, and we'll get Macca back to see if his prediction came true or not, which is post day 5. Until then, Macca, have a great watch. Of course, again, it's going to be terribly viewing us for all you guys back home, but try to get some sleep and enjoy the game.
Thanks, Avinash. Can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Cheers. Right, so that was Craig McMillan just shedding some light on what's going to happen because, look, rain might play a big part in this one given the weather forecast at the Wankhede. But we all really are expecting a great game of cricket. So let's hope that remains intact. Thanks for watching.